Welcome to Beyond Belief. This is your host, Pooja Chilakuri. My guest today is Nicole Fabrizio. Nicole is a former Marine and she has had a journey of spiritual transformation, and she is here today with us to share that with us. Thank you so much, Nicole, for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Pooja. I'm honored.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to, be vulnerable and share your life story with us. So I know you were a former Marine, but before that, just walk us a little bit through your early childhood and what kind of religious or spiritual beliefs you had.
So I don't know if mine was necessarily one that is unrelatable, but it was a little bit different in that I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So my parents were very active in the congregation, and we went multiple times a week. It was something that was super important to my father. My mother, a little bit less so. I had three older brothers, and all of us were kind of dragged to the church every week because it was very boring for us. But my father was very active. He was an elder, which I'm not sure what the equivalent of that would be in any other church, maybe a minister. But he was active for most of his life in that for about over 50 years. That was, his mainstay. But I was born into it. My parents were already very deep into the religion by the time I was born. And I came along a little later in their life. They were in their early 40s. And so when I was born into this, it was something that was already more of a, I would say, habit for them than it was something that was like a real deep, heartfelt belief. I don't know how it was for them in the beginning. I can't speak to it, but I know that by the time I came around, it was something that was more habitual.
Mhm.
And and so it was more of obligatory. Like we had to go to church 3 days a week, and we had to do Bible study. We had to comment during, some of the meetings, and there were things that were just expected. And I was never given really any deep explanation as to like, well, this is why we do this, or this is, you know, uh, the importance of it, or this is how you kind of develop a relationship with God. It was just, these are the rules. This is what you have to do. And I don't want to hear from you about anything else,
Mhm.
which I suppose as a child of the 70s, that's not too surprising. It's kind of how it was for us.
Yes.
Um, so being raised in that religion, there wasn't a lot of interaction between my parents and I about religion, other than okay, you're going to go to church. And when I went to these meetings, as they call them, um, it seemed more kind of the way that they talked about God was in a way that was almost this two-dimensional kind of comic book character, if you will. It didn't seem authentic, and it didn't seem real. I couldn't relate at all to the God that they were describing. It seemed so far fetched for me. The whole idea of God was something that was kind of out there, very far away, and you had to do certain things. And if you didn't do these certain things, then you would ultimately be punished through an eternal death.
Mhm.
So I was fortunate in as much that I didn't have something like some other religions where there's, forever torment in hell or something along
Mhm.
those lines. It was just you were going to be dead forever, which I guess is a little bit easier to digest. Um, so for me, it seemed odd. And I can recall from a super young age being somewhat just, I guess, questioning what the reality of God was,
Mhm.
because the way that they were describing him, and I say him because it is always just a masculine. I don't know if this, I don't know how to have a pronoun around God, but I'll use him for ease of conversation. But um, it was this very flat and kind of unanimated individual. And I thought, well, this is weird because, they talked about stories, and the gist of it was, if you weren't going to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, then God was going to kill you. That was the essence of it. And I thought to myself, and they always talked about, they said, God is our father. And so I was a very literal minded kid. So I thought to myself, so if God is like my dad's going to kill me? Like, that seemed to me like, wow, my father wouldn't kill me, but God's going to kill me? I couldn't wrap my head around it. It seemed really, really far out there. So I started questioning things from a very early age. And that probably had more to do with my parents. And I'm not sure if all Jehovah's Witness kids kind of felt like this, but maybe it was more because my parents did such a poor job of kind of explaining the religion to me. But that was my introduction to religion, and to, God in general. But, Pooja, the interesting piece of this is, religion wasn't necessarily something that captured my heart. It wasn't something I was on fire for. Like, I didn't feel super connected necessarily to the church, or, to the congregation. I never connected and embedded myself to it. Partly because my parents both had serious mental health issues. They both were very heavy drinkers. So I saw much of the hypocrisy in my own house. And so I questioned a lot of things because of it. But I never questioned the idea of God. It always, to me, was an absolute. Like, of course there's a God. It just wasn't this comic book character they're describing. It just didn't, I related to God, and the way that I thought of it, in probably a little bit less sophisticated way, was I thought of myself, and I thought of how much I tend to love everything. I wake up in the mornings with just overabundance of love. I just was such a happy kid, and joyful. And I knew that wherever I came from, that's what it was. And it wasn't this stern, punishing, angry God that was described to me. It was going to be more like me. I just knew it in my heart. So I didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater when it came to God. I just couldn't really kind of get in the groove of the religion, so to speak.
Thank you for sharing that, Nicole. I know, we've talked earlier, and by the way, thank you very much to those that are watching and listening. I just want to mention here that Nicole's been a huge catalyst in getting this channel started for me, because this is something that I've been meaning to do for a very long time. I have another podcast called the Afterlife Podcast, where I interview those who've had near-death experiences. And I was really shying away from this topic of religious deconstruction, and I think it was Providence, Nicole, when you reached out to me and we connected online. So, and here we are today recording. You are my first guest, and very appropriately so. So, here you are drawn to God as a child through your intuition and through your heart, and then you have this religion that you're born into. So, at any point in life, did God become more important? Like, how did you want to pursue this more, or when did you have sort of a transformation?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I actually went through a complete separation. So when I was 13 years old, I was given a choice by the congregation and my parents to leave the religion, should I choose to, because I was now, an age where I could make decisions for myself. And I chose to. I remember the 13th birthday, I said, okay, I'm done with this, I'm leaving. But it was in my early 20s. I never, like I had said, I mentioned, I never really doubted that God existed, but in my early 20s, I had a boyfriend at the time, and we were having a conversation. I couldn't tell you what a conversation was about, but I do recall he asked me a specific question. And the question he had asked me was, why is it so important for you to believe that God exists?
Mm.
And I remember being rocked on my heels. It was the first time doubt was ever introduced to me about the existence of God. I never questioned it. Never. It's not that I didn't know that there were atheist people out there, but it wasn't like those weren't real people, were they? And here I was dating one, and I didn't even know he was atheist. And I felt I was in a place in my life where I was kind of thinking more philosophically and considering more, deep issues. And so I questioned it. I took his question very seriously, and I thought about, why is this? Why is God real? What evidence do I really have of God existing? I'm just taking everybody's word. Do I just want to believe that God exists, or do I have proof of this? So I think I was strongly influenced by him. He was very compelling in a lot of arguments. He was very intellectual. And he got me thinking that, maybe God doesn't exist. Well, there were a few life experiences that had happened after, of course, this boyfriend was, he was there and gone. He wasn't, a long stay in the life, but they were negative experiences. I remember thinking, well, okay, God, like, where are you if you exist? And I got really snotty. I know early 20s can be kind of a bugger of years for some people. And me, I was kind of a snot nose. And I thought to myself, well, what kind of game is this? I was very human about the whole thing. I thought, what kind of game are you playing with me, God? you're playing hide and seek. Where are you? I mean, you say you're all knowing, and what you stick us on this earth. I'm going through these awful, horrible things. I'm completely alone. I'm begging for some kind of anything sign from you, and I've got nothing. So I got really pissy about the whole thing, kind of hands on the hips, and God, if you're real, then you will show yourself to me. I demand it right now. Give me a sign. such an idiot kid. But this is truly, and I say this with all sincerity, that I was deeply hurting at the time. And I needed something, I believed, from God. I needed something to keep me going, because this was a very, very hard time in my life. And I don't know what exactly. I didn't ask for anything specific. I just needed something. And I didn't receive anything that I could see. Nothing I noticed. And so I began to think, I'm just having conversations with myself. There's nothing out there. And maybe this boyfriend was right, very sadly. And I know that I fell into a bit of a depression around it. I felt so deeply saddened. I felt like I had been deceived. And then the whole idea that life is completely meaningless. We're here and we're gone. But why do I feel so much love? Why am I such a loving person? And why is everything so awful around me? So I would say that I got to a point where I would claim myself to be atheist. I got a little bit older. I had gone into the Marine Corps. I did that for 8 years, and during which time, towards the end, I started to get my education. And that's a great place to really kind of bring home the atheist to roost, so to speak. They're going to kind of compound that belief. So I was around people who were atheist minded, and I was trying very hard to convince myself that there is no God, even though it saddened me deeply. That was a big, I disconnected from it for many years. And I remember seeing people who were religious or going to church, and I felt envy. I felt so envious. I wanted that. I wanted the connection again. But I just felt like, well, God never answered me as many times as I'd asked him to. So I guess I'm atheist now. But as things would turn out, that was, of course, as otherwise I wouldn't be here today, was not long lasting. It didn't last forever.
Was there a moment in time that it changed, or was it over time?
It was There was something of a moment in time. There wasn't. It's probably not something that the experience itself isn't so much worth even explaining it, but there were, suffice to say, I think enough experiences that I was personally having that were unexplainable by any other means.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes, in life we'll have coincidences with people or something, and something so strange, and how it gives you that kind of strange feeling in your chest or your belly of, oh, what was that? That was so unusual. That was so odd. I was having a lot of that. I was having a lot of those experiences. And then it was really, I met my second husband. I met him the day my father had died 1 year ago earlier. And I had actually, the previous year, I would start having some of these kind of different experiences that just were meaningful to me. It started to kind of bring some doubt into my head about my atheism. I thought, God, maybe I was being a little snot-nosed kid, because now I'm a little bit older. I'm in my 40s at this point, and it's been 20 plus years, and I thought, well, maybe I actually should think about some of these things more thoroughly, because I'm brushing them off and they feel pretty significant. And so at one point I decided, this was really, I think, the turning point for me. At one point I had family over. I don't have much family surviving. Most of my family has passed, but I did have some younger family, some nephews, nephew and his children and over. And I realized I was so completely isolated and lonely when it came to my life. I had chosen a path with pursuit of education. I was in a PhD program. I was, very busy with work. I had all these things going on around me, but I didn't have any type of spiritual fulfillment. And I found when I was sitting with my family, I kind of felt that way. I felt connected in a spiritual way with them, and I couldn't explain why. So I had gone into prayer that night, something I hadn't done in like 20 plus years. I went into prayer and I asked God for family. How, in which, at the time, the ship had sailed for having kids for myself. I'm too old for that. And um, where else was family going to come from? It was this kind of bizarre request, but I thought, I really want family. And I thought, well, if it's God and he's really there, he'll make it happen for me. So I threw the prayer off them, and I thought, well, what does it hurt? And I prayed from a very heartfelt place, and I let it go. I had the prayer, and then I just kind of forgot about it. And that was just about a year before everything had kind of changed in my life. I had divorced the current husband, and after the dust had settled there, in comes my husband number two and his big Italian family. So it was about a year later. I had that, the kind of answer. I got my family, and it was a big family, and it was a wonderful family.
Well, that makes me so happy to hear that, Nicole. Wow. So would you say that was a turning point for you?
Yeah, I think that was really the piece, because it was so specific for me.
Mhm.
This prayer, I asked for something so very specific, and the manner in which kind of I met my husband and how we connected felt almost like divine intervention. Um, but that was really a piece that I went, wow, that was a pretty specific prayer, and I feel like it was kind of answered with this in a way I never imagined it was going to happen, but there it was.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say, yeah, that was kind of the point I went, whoa, wait, is there something more? So I began to pray. After I met him, I began to pray with regularity on things to see what happens when I pray.
Mhm. Mhm. I really love your story, Nicole, because it's very, to me, it's without the structures of organized religion. This you're talking about just a connection, with the divine, with source, and all these little synchronicities that happen, right? To me, this is the way of the mystics in a way because it's experiential.
Yeah.
It's not something that's been told or handed down like a rule or a set of rituals or habits. So this is very precious. Thank you for sharing that. So, I do have a question. Like, so if you were sort of inclined towards atheism before, and then now you're developing this connection with God, source, uh, did the people around you notice and did it affect your relationships? Because a lot of times when we're changing from within, especially spiritually, it starts to affect our friends and all the people that are around us. Did you have that kind of experience or?
I did somewhat, yes, because most everybody I knew from school, from the PhD program, most of them were atheists, and I was a loudly declared atheist. I guess now protest too much. I tried to make sure everybody knew so I could convince myself I was an atheist. Um, but yes, people around me did notice. My husband, of course, he was kind of, this is an interesting change. His family as well. Um, my brothers, but interestingly, it was all for the most part positive. Everybody, I got a couple of comments from people that were negative, but overall, most people were like, "Well, good for you." They don't really care either way too much because it wasn't a big part of their life. They're not religious per se, but they were happy to see the contentment that I was reflecting because
Mhm.
of my now kind of reignited interest in God again.
Yeah. I really love your story, Nicole, because there really isn't. Because, I talk to people that have deconstructed from different denominations or religions, right? And sometimes we end up exploring different faiths, different religions. Again, but it's back to structure. So I really love that yours was just a connection. And do you find that that connection has changed flavor over the years?
Yes. So for me, because of specifically being raised in a very strict religious upbringing
Mhm.
with a lot of rules and things, I have always been very standoffish when it comes to organized religion.
Mhm.
I guess I've had my own level of trauma because of it.
Mhm.
And I felt like the judgmentalness, the restrictiveness,
Mhm.
and the dogma that went with it, it didn't sit with me well at all.
Mhm.
And I think it made me even more sensitive given, my early formative years around it.
Mhm.
So um, as I began to reconstruct
Mhm.
my relationship, I would say, with God, it was very much for me a conscious choice
Mhm.
without knowing much about anything that if God existed, that that excitement, that joy I felt in my heart as a little kid, I'd wake up and a little
Mhm.
less so as I got older. I think it wears thin, it's like, oh, got aches and pains in the morning. But when you're young and you wake up, you got butterflies in your belly and you're so excited. And that's how I felt as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
That to me was the essence of God. That
Mm-hmm.
that spirit I felt, that had to be heaven. That had to be a piece of heaven for,
Mm-hmm.
and so I chose to believe that if God existed, early on, my thought was, if God exists, then that's what he is. He's just pure love.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not any of the other stuff. I can't imagine it being anything different than that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't claim to know or have any, deep knowledge as to, there's plenty I could learn, but as far as what my heart and
Mm-hmm.
my gut tells me is that it can't be anything other than love. So when I started to reconstruct my relationship around God, that was the basis for it, that it is love. And I guess I have, that kind of confirmation bias. I look for it everywhere and like, oh, look, there's love.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I began to start to try and develop a more spiritual connection,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I began to do along the line is to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
My husband had encouraged me. I have some health issues, and at some point I was kind of struggling. He said I should probably, try some meditation. And so I did start to meditate. And while I started to meditate, I began to notice something of almost a freedom kind of mentally when I was there. I thought, oh, this feels good. So I kept doing it. I was nothing more than just how the space that you get mentally away from all the chitter chatter and calm my mind down. So I really enjoyed it. So I began to do that. And um, along the way, I was, as I said, I was having some health problems. That's some pretty serious. I have multiple sclerosis. And at one point, I had become so sick that I was pretty much bedridden at this point. And I realized I had a serious conversation with my husband because I was deteriorating pretty fast. I said, this could potentially, kind of be the end of things for me. How do we want to set up, end of life care? How do we want to do this? So I began to contemplate my own, death. And I wasn't sure, it felt like my body was shutting down. I could feel like a contraction almost. I just felt like everything felt very small and contracted. And yet the doctor said, well, you're not dying, you're just sick. And I said, but I feel like I'm shutting down. That was the word I kept saying, I'm shutting down. The doctors are like, no, you're just really sick. I thought, well, something's wrong. I went into a meditative state one afternoon, and it was almost a meditative prayer is what it was. And I remember focusing on trying to figure out what is this that's happening? Am I dying? Am I just really sick? What is going on? Why do I feel so strange? And in that, I was completely surrendered. And I remember focusing on just my body, what was happening. And I received what felt like a nugget of information just planted in my head. People call it like a knowing.
Mm-hmm.
I call them messages.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, you're having a spiritual death. And I remember it was so distinctive. I popped my eyes open and I thought, a spiritual death? What is this that you speak of? This is craziness. I was a little floored by it because it was clear, not me. And so I remember going online, Googling spiritual death. What is a spiritual death? Of course, the Google tells me nothing about what a spiritual death is. There's all this other kind of crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that was really weird. I don't know what a spiritual death is. Well, I continue along this, and a couple weeks later, we were living out of the country at the time. We came back home. His my husband's mother was having open heart surgery, so we come home for this, and I was very ill, like I said at the time, so I was just mostly in bed, not moving around much, and I was continuing to meditate, and in that meditation, I had gotten what was like another message, and the message was to stop all medications. I
Mm,
was taking a boatload of medications. When you have MS, there is no medication they don't want to give you. You've got everything under the sun. I mean, from, vitamin D to, hardcore stimulants, everything, trying to just keep you awake and alive. And the meditation, I had been kind of thinking of, how can I just end this suffering? How do I stop the suffering? And then that meditation is when I got the message to stop all medications.
mhm,
And I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to stop all medications. I'm going to get either better or I'm going to go. But either way, it's going to be over. I was totally excited about this. Yeah, my family, not so much. They were kind of ticked, as you can imagine. But I did do that. I stopped all the medications. And I was kind of sick from the withdrawals for the first couple of days. But then on the third day, I awoke and I actually felt a little bit better.
mhm,
And every day after that, I felt a little better and a little better. And I shared with my family. Like, I feel like I got a message and this was the message. And everybody kind of gives me the side eye. I don't know about that. You're kind of thinking you want to believe that. And long story short, I began to heal
mhm,
because I heeded the advice of the messages I was getting.
mhm,
And I continue to this day. I've had struggles and with some of the physical stuff, but every time I'm in a place with it where I'm struggling, I'll get some more information. And basically, what it had come down to was the contraction I was feeling was a spiritual contraction.
mm,
And as soon as I began to heed the advice of things, the advice I was getting to connect with people, to stop focusing on the illness, to start focusing on the life, and to connect with my own self spiritually, to stop denying my own spirituality, then all of those symptoms had gone away. All the strange, and then I was back up on my feet and feeling better. So it wasn't that I'm not sick with MS. It was that where I was at with my own spirituality, with my own life, with denying who I was, not being open to my life as it should be, was causing things to be a lot worse.
mhm.
So it changed significantly over time.
Oh my goodness, Nicole. And you raised such an important point. It's very close to my heart from, being in the health and wellness space, mind, body, spirit. Many times, the spirit is driving our bodies. We just don't realize it. And I think there's a very beautiful verse. I think it's in the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament where it says that a man's spirit sustains them in sickness. Right?
Yes.
The spirit is what's sustaining the body, right? And that's such a beautiful example of that you just shared, Nicole. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. The one thing that when I was listening to you, you talked about the presence, right? Just being that deep presence that you felt as a child and even over the years, right? And knowing that there is love there. So I really feel like meditation is one of the tools that does bring people, quiet your mind, and it brings you into that deep space.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that as well. I have so many questions for you. Our time's almost up, but I do have my last two questions. One is, a lot of people, when we are trying to follow our unique path with God and spirit, and we have our own set of practices, and there's this, the connection, and it's not within the constraints of organized religion. So what might end up happening, like it did for me and for some others, we lose like the community aspect of it
Yeah.
sometimes. Um, so do you have any thoughts around that? Because I know that organized religion, one of the things it does great is community and service, like the whole charity and other services. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's an extremely important point. I I guess I somewhat in a way can relate to it. My experience being, different obviously from many people who've, deconstructed. Um, I had isolation because of health issues.
Mhm.
And isolation, whether it comes from being, an outcast from the church, or whether it's because, getting up out of bed just is more than you can do that day, is absolutely, I believe, the number one thing that chokes the spirit off. And
Mm,
that's what you need to keep going. And when you are ostracized from anything for whatever reason, it is the absolute worst feeling in the world. And so for me personally, um, it is not something that you can passively do. My thought is, when I had to reconnect with life after, being sick for so long and having no connection to humans, I thought, well, how do I go about doing this? I don't know even kind of who I am. And I thought, I kind of don't even know who I. Okay, so I need to go out and do things. I need to find my authentic self. And I really didn't even know. I was so lost. I've been so, all these things had happened and it kind of happened fast to me. And so for me, and I still do this today. I still do this. I go out and I like to try new things.
mhm,
And I figure that if I behave from a place of authenticity, and it's not easy, it's not like it's easy just going out and making friends. It's one of the harder things that you can do
mhm,
in life. But try new things, and you keep trying new things, and you keep, talking with people. Sometimes you don't have somebody who's going to be a lifelong friend, but to me, even if that person's, say, 85 years old and I don't have much in common with them, you have an opportunity with every person that you meet, whether it be for 1 second, 1 hour, 1 year, whatever it is, to connect with them and to have that kind of shared experience
mhm,
of just love,
mhm,
whatever it is, kindness. It doesn't have to be significant. Focusing on that and being authentic for me has been really the thing that has helped get me back out there, get me reconnected with friends and people. It looks different. My life looks different. And it's a slow rebuild, but it has to be effortful and it has to be honest.
mhm.
And if you come from a place of sincerity and honesty, you will find your people, you'll find your tribe. That's my
I
thought on
found
it.
you. I found you, Nicole.
Yeah, and I found you, Pooja. See,
I
it
know,
happens.
and you're joining us all the way from Reno, Nevada, and I'm on the East Coast. It does happen, doesn't it?
Yes, it
It's
does.
such an honor for me to consider you as friend. So thank you. Thank you very
Same
much.
here. I feel the
Yeah,
same.
yes, you just proved it. You're living what you're talking, Nicole. So I appreciate that. And then the very last question is w- just if you would share with us if somebody is deconstructing right now and they may be feeling confused, do you have any words of wisdom?
Oh, words of wisdom from me. Let's hope the words of wisdom come from above. Um, Let me think for a moment. I would say that during points of significant change in your life, that the most important thing is to honor your own intuition, your own gut feelings,
Mhm,
and to know that even though it may not be validated by things externally right now,
mhm,
eventually it will be.
mhm.
And that there is always, always the flip side to any suffering is always joy. There's always happiness. So whatever you're going through now may feel lonely, it may feel isolated, it may feel confusing, but the opposite, if that exists, then the opposite must too. So if you're feeling isolated, then you are going to feel connected eventually. And you're going to feel confused, you'll have clarity eventually. These things come in cycles, and it's always temporary. It's always temporary. And don't doubt that what you're doing is the right thing because it's the right thing for you. May not be right for the guy next to you or your mom or your sister or whoever, but if it's right for you, honoring your authenticity is the most important thing in life.
Thank you. Thank you for those beautiful words. And our time has come to an end, but before we sign off, I do want to thank you for your service to our country.
Oh, thank you, Pooja.
Thank you, Nicole.